Hi, I'm Clint Smith, and this is Crash Course Black American History. Today, we're going to be talking about the Louisiana Rebellion of 1811, which was the largest slave revolt in American history. The Louisiana Rebellion of 1811, also known as the German Coast Uprising, was epic by all accounts. On what was called Epiphany Sunday, some emboldened enslaved men reached an epiphany like no other. They were determined to take the city of New Orleans and burn everything else down in the process. Let's check it out. I want to note up top that this episode will address some challenging topics and include descriptions of extreme violence. A few days after Epiphany Sunday, on a rainy evening the night of January 8, 1811, hundreds of enslaved men took up arms, determined to secure their freedom. It is remarkable to consider that hundreds of enslaved people who came from different countries with different native languages and different tribal affiliations were able to organize themselves as effectively as they did. Dressed in military garb, this group marched through plantations from Louisiana's German coast all the way to New Orleans, and they gathered more soldiers as they went. On the German coast of Louisiana, where the rebellion took place, named as such for the German immigrants who settled there, roughly 60% of the total population was enslaved. The fear of armed insurrection had long been in the air. The leader of this rebellion was a mixed-race slave driver named Charles Dillon. Dillon had been inspired by the Haitian Revolution that ended only 7 years prior in 1804, a revolution in which black forces, who at various points had fought off the British, the Spanish, and the French, created the first nation to permanently ban slavery and would become the first black republic in the entire world. The German Coast Uprising revealed the Haitian Revolution's impact not only on the demographics of Louisiana, which up to that point had been importing enslaved workers from Haiti, but also how the success of the revolution fundamentally changed the trajectory of the U.S. and its history by making possible the Louisiana Purchase. See, in 1803, Thomas Jefferson purchased a huge chunk of North America from France. Whether he was allowed to do so under his presidential authority is up for debate. But in any case, Napoleon Bonaparte was in need of some money after the Haitian Revolution had dashed his hopes of building a French empire in the New World. The French army was so beleaguered from battle and disease that by the end of the war, more than 80% of the soldiers sent to try and quell the Haitian Revolution had died. Napoleon Bonaparte, looking to cut his losses and refocus his attention on his military battles in Europe, sold the entire territory of Louisiana to Thomas Jefferson's negotiators for a paltry $15 million, about 4 cents an acre. Without the Haitian Revolution, it's really unlikely that Napoleon would have sold a landmass that doubled the size of the then United States, especially as Jefferson had only intended to approach the French basically looking to just purchase New Orleans in order to have access to the mouth of the Mississippi River. There were also many Haitians who emigrated to the U.S. in the years following the Revolution. According to historian Manisha Sinha, the most direct consequence of the Haitian Revolution in the United States was the influx of refugees into cities like New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Charleston, and New Orleans. In other words, New Orleans and much of southern Louisiana had long-standing connections with Haiti. This tells us a lot about the climate at the time of the German Coast Uprising. A significant amount of the enslaved population had arrived soon after witnessing a slave uprising that led to the abolition of slavery and the establishment of a free country. So as I'm sure you can imagine, a number of the refugees that came to the United States were very much bringing the spirit of the Haitian Revolution alongside them. Historians aren't positive, but believe Charles Dillon was born either in Saint-Domingue, current-day Haiti, or in Louisiana in 1787. Either way, by 1811, Charles was a slave driver on the plantation of Manuel Andre. Andre was known for the cruelty and violence he practiced on his plantation. But Charles was an overseer, which granted him more privileges than some other enslaved people. It also gave him the right to inflict punishment on other enslaved people. And while this did not mean he was exempt from Andre's cruelty or violence, His position granted him some relative power within the larger slave system. It was another one of the upsetting and insidious things about slavery, both to be tasked with inflicting violence on the enslaved while you are enslaved yourself. What we find, however, is that in the context of this rebellion, Charles's position was essential in hatching and carrying out the plan. Black men sometimes occupied the role of overseer in the Deep South, which positioned them as a sort of middleman between the plantation owner and the plantation laborer. When enslaved laborers made plans to resist, they would usually have to communicate in code or in secret or in small groups to avoid getting caught by the overseer. But if the overseer is the one coming up with the plan, rather than the one trying to stop it, it's a whole different ballgame. But Charles didn't do this work alone. To pull off something like this, he would need help. And two enslaved men, named Cook and Quamana, worked closely by Charles's side and emerged as influential leaders of this rebellion. So what was the plan? While it's difficult to know exactly because of limited documentation from the time, there is some important information that we do know. Let's go to the thought bubble. The Sunday just before the uprising, plantation owner James Brown spotted three men, Charles, Quamana, and Harry, an enslaved carpenter from Virginia, all meeting in secret. They packed into a small shack behind the big house of the Andrew plantation, while the rest of the enslaved population was out enjoying Epiphany Sunday. Enslaved black people who grew their own crops, in addition to their duties, regularly met on Sundays in the marketplace to trade with one another. The marketplace, filled with a mix of African captives, Haitians, and native-born Black Americans, was not only a place to trade goods, but was also often a festive place, with drums and singing and dancing. Spanish enslavers, who were well experienced with trading and managing African captives, thought that this was a bad idea, commenting that these celebratory proceedings could be masking real plans to rebel. And they were right. Historians have noted that these dancing sessions could also serve as covert military training. From the time they arrived in 1806, Cook and Quamana used such events to tap into the network of enslaved people from all over New Orleans. They immediately showed discontent for their enslaved status and took to the streets spreading the word of their plans to rebel away from the watchful eyes and listening ears of the white planter class. So we can't determine what exactly Charles and the others were saying in those secret meetings, but it's clear that it provided kindling for what would become one of the most explosive rebellions in American history. Thanks, Thought Bubble. The rebellion began when between 15 and 25 enslaved men attacked Manuel Andrew on his plantation. Though wounded, Andrew managed to escape to warn the other plantation owners in his vicinity. Andrew's son Gilbert, however, was killed. The rebels then broke into Manuel Andrew's stores and stole weapons and militia uniforms. As they moved into St. Charles Parish, they amassed quite a following. While some available documents suggest that only 124 enslaved people participated, several eyewitness accounts attest to much larger numbers, closer to 500. As the men marched along the bends of the river, drums rumbling, flags held high above their heads, they attacked several plantations with an assortment of knives, machetes, muskets, and other scavenged weapons, killing 2 white men and destroying property in their wake. Still, not many of the enslaved fighters had guns, and it would only take a small number of armed troops to stop their liberatory march. And within 48 hours, local militia and federal troops had suppressed the rebellion. DeLong briefly escaped the initial wave of slaughter by hiding in the swamp, but was quickly captured and then executed. His hands were chopped off, the bones in his legs were shattered by bullets, and he was burned over a bale of straw. Many of the rebels were slaughtered on sight, their heads cut off and posted on stakes that lined the levee, a warning to other enslaved people that this was the price to pay for rebellion. Naval officer Samuel Hambledon wrote, "They were brung here for the sake of their heads, which decorate our levee, all the way up the coast. They look like crows sitting on long poles." Commodore Shaw captured the planters' sense of fear that pushed them to respond with such violence against those who had participated in the insurrection and made an example to the larger enslaved population. Had not the most prompt and energetic measures been thus taken, the whole coast would have exhibited a general sense of devastation. Every description of property would have been consumed, and the country laid waste by rioters. The backlash was brutal. Alarmed enslavers in Louisiana invested deep resources in training local militia, and slave patrols began surveilling black people with increasing frequency, in addition to limiting their ability to congregate in large groups. Meanwhile, the federal government committed to defending the institution of slavery by officially granting Louisiana statehood as a slave state in 1812. Unlike some other rebellions that have become central to our collective memory of slavery in this country, the 1811 slave revolt has received far less attention. As we mentioned, there are no real notes of what was said between the co-conspirators, and we don't have much that gives us insight into what Charles may have been thinking. So while scholars are unclear why Charles would have been willing to give up the security that his position gave him, what is clear is that, for him, tearing down the institution was worth risking it all. So, was the 1811 uprising a success? As we've said before, notions of what is or isn't a successful slave revolt are subjective and kind of less important than the fact that the rebellion took place at all. Because while they may not have been able to take the city, they certainly dealt a blow to the system, one that would change the entire framework of the institution for years to come. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Crash Course is made with the help of all these nice people, and our animation team is Thought Cafe. Crash Course is a Complexly production, and if you'd like to keep Crash Course free for everybody, forever, you can support the series at Patreon, a crowdfunding platform that allows you to support the content that you love. Thanks to all our patrons for making Crash Course possible with your continued support.